Hi there, welcome to our final unit. It's going to be pretty short. Finances. So we're just going to do 4 lessons on this unit. 2 in the first week, 2 in the second week. So let's get right to it. And we're going to start by talking about a topic called simple interest. Alright, so the good news about this unit is it's not very difficult. It's just generally learning to use these formulas and to calculate interest. This is, and different things too, not just interest. So we'll go through all the different stuff here. It's probably the most practical unit. When I was your age, I actually started using this unit, especially when I went to university, as I wanted to understand, if I was taking out a loan from my school or borrowing money for a car, I could actually sit down and figure it out myself how much it was going to cost. You could call a bank and say, well, what's the interest rate? You could ask around and you could actually figure it out yourself. How much you'd end up paying for things, or if you borrowed money, or if you lent someone money. So to be honest with you, this is a super important, although short unit, okay? So let's look at an example here, and we're gonna start on something called simple interest. Okay, so we'll go through these definitions as we look at this example. So Sarah wants to invest $3,000, okay? So she's gonna invest $3,000 at the bank. Her bank will pay her 4.5% of the principal per year. All right, so every year she's going to get 4.5% interest. She's going to earn that money in her savings account, and it earns simple interest. That's the key. We want to look for these words. Is it simple interest, or we're going to learn something about compound interest in our next lesson? Okay. All right, so first of all, per year, I want to point out some different things here. You are going to start seeing the word per annum, which also means per year. I believe annum is Latin for year. I make sure I spell it right here. I think so. And a lot of times what they'll write, instead of even saying per year, is they'll write this interest rate like this. They'll write 4.5%, and then you'll see /A, which means per annum or per year. Okay, so that's very common jargon in the financial world. So just keep an eye out for that. Per annum meaning per year. All right, so the first thing we want to identify is the principal. So this is a phrase, again, all these are really key phrases in the financial world. Any that go into any kind of business of any sort in university, even if it's just taking some courses, not all courses, you're going to hear all these definitions a lot. So the principal is the sum of money that is borrowed or invested. Now okay, so in this case, obviously the principal is the $3,000, right? So I'll just write that here, $3,000. Is how much she is investing. But let's be clear here. There's always a borrower and there's always an investor when it comes to interest in money, right? So think about if you and the bank, right? Here's you and here's the bank. Now, if you are borrowing money from the bank, right? So if you're the borrower, the bank's the lender, right? Which means you are paying interest, so you're paying them money, and they are earning interest. They are earning money, right? Now, what about the other way around? What about if you invest money? When you invest money in the bank, when you take money to the bank, you become the lender, okay? And the bank becomes the borrower. So this is how banks, get a lot of money to use to lend out to other people. So we won't go too deep in all that right now, but the idea is that when you're the lender, you earn interest from the bank, right? You earn the money and they pay you the interest. So there's no difference in these scenarios whether you're the lender or whether you're the borrower, because somebody is always paying interest and somebody is always earning interest. And that kind of confuses people at the start because they get really hung up on that idea. It really doesn't matter. It's the same formula no matter what. Right? Let's figure out how much interest there is in this case. It's 4.5%. We got to figure out how much money that is. Right? The bank is paying her. If I could literally just change this, I could change one word, and instead of investing, we could change it to she's borrowing. We would do everything exactly the same. We would calculate everything the same. The only difference is that she would be the one paying the interest to the bank. So it doesn't change the question, who's the borrower, who's the lender. It doesn't change the formulas we use or things like that. Okay? So just keep that in mind as we do these questions. Okay, so let's look at this scenario in a table, which is really a common way to do this, and then we're going to talk about the formulas, okay? So it's important. I want to do this table first. I know it's boring, but and same when I get into the next lesson so we can really compare and understand how this all works. So like year 0, right? So we're going to say how long is she investing it for each year? It doesn't say. So you know what we're going to say here? let's just say that it is 3 years. I don't know how I left that out of the question. So she's going to invest it for 3 years. I must have just forgot. All right, so that's how long she's going to invest it for. So year 0, right? She's not earning anything. It's just, this is like the start, right? So starting at 0, I go to the bank today, I deposit the money, I'm going to invest $3,000, and the bank says, okay, we're going to pay you simple interest, 4.5% for 3 years. You can't touch it, right? And at the end of 3 years, you can get your money back and the interest. Okay, so let's do year 1. So now let's say we've finished the first year, right? How much interest is she going to earn? Well, the interest you're going to earn, right? Let's just write interest here. Pretty easy. She's getting 4.5%, right? 4.5% of $3,000, right? So how are we going to calculate that? Well, 4.5%, remember percent symbol means divide by 100, so it's 0.045 times $3,000. All right, so let's multiply it and see what we, and it's going to be $135. Okay, so that's how much she got, $135. All right, so now to get the amount is the total that you have for the investment, right? How much do you have? So right now at the end of the first year, she's going to have $3,000 plus the $135. So altogether, she's going to have $3,125. I know it's pretty basic and boring, but there you go, right? Okay, so there we go. There's how much she's got at the end of the first year. So I'm just going to highlight these. There's how she started with. There's what she's got at the end of the first year. Now, it follows the same way. For year 2, she gets $135 again. It's the same interest every year. It doesn't go up or go down. She's only getting 4.5% interest on the original $3,000. And that's the key to simple interest, because when we get into compound interest in the next lesson, it's different. So remember this. With simple interest, and I'm going to come over here and kind of highlight what it says here, the interest earned or paid only on the original sum of money that was invested or borrowed. So you're only getting it on that $3,000. So all we're going to do is go, all right, let's add another $135 to our total. Oops, I wrote 125 over here. Sorry, it should be 135. And we get, so again, I'm going to take the 3,135 and add another 135, and you get 3,270, right? That's how much you have at the end of the second year. And then one more time for the third year, right? Same thing. She earns $135 interest. Let's take how much money she had at the end of the second year, which is $3,270, add the $135, and her final amount she has is $3,405. All right, so there's our final amount there. We'll make that, highlight that in yellow. I don't know, I got no rhyme or reason in my highlighting scheme. It's just all over the place. All right, so that's how much she earned at the end. Now, there's a pattern to this, right? Anytime there's a pattern, we can make a formula to this. So let's break down all the different stuff that's going on here so we can understand it. So interest. What's happening here? All we're doing, right, when we calculate the interest is, notice it's just $135, $135, $135, just times the number of years, right? Just, we had 3 years. So all we got to do is just figure out the interest and times by how many years. It's a pretty simple formula for this one. Now, what they like to do here is they like to use P for principal. I'm going to put a P here. So these are the symbols they like to use. P for principal. For the interest rate that you earn, let's see here. So for the rate, which would be the 4.5%, I'm just going to, they like to use R. So R, in this case, would be the 0.045%, right? Because it's, sorry, it's 4.5%. Oh man, I'm stumbling over my words, which is 0.045. So that's what they like to use for that. They like to use R for that. And they like to use capital I for the interest. So the interest you get is this. All it is here's the formula we want, right? I for interest, okay? They like to use this. It's interest equals the principal, right, times the rate times time. So that's the formula there. So that's the formula we're looking for. And that's all we did. Think about it. What did we do here? The principal, right? So isn't that the $3,000? I did that over here. So in our case, right, $3,000, right, times the rate. Isn't that what I did over here? I just multiplied 3,000 by 0.45. So we already basically did this, right? So I'll write I equals 3,000 times 0.045. And then all we have to do is times it by the number of years, which is 3 years, right? So times it by 3. And that would give us the amount of interest we earn. So if a question says just how much interest did they earn from simple interest, we just multiply those 3 together, which is essentially what is $135 times 3 years, which is $405. So there you go, $405. There's our interest, right? So that's the formula. Let's again maybe highlight that really clearly, right? There's the formula we want. Interest equals principal, the amount you started with, times the interest rate, times the time, the number of years. Now, the amount you end up at the end, so they like to use A for amount, okay? So the A stands for amount. The amount is the total value of the investment. So how much money do you have at the end of this investment, right? How much do you get back from the bank? Basically, you go in after 3 years, how much do you get back? That is this number right here. That's what we call the amount in finances. The amount is how much do you have at the end. So if you borrowed money from the bank, you owe them $3,405. If you lent money to the bank because you deposited to invest, you get back $3,405, right? So here's the formula for that, but let's be a little more clear here. So they like to write this, A equals P plus I. But didn't we just say that the I was P plus times R times T, right? That's what I is. So another way of writing this formula is, or I'm really squeezing it to the bottom of the page here, is I can just common factor out the P and I can just write 1 plus R times T. So that one there is generally the formula I'm going to use if I just want to find out the total amount, okay, at the end. So basically there's 2 formulas you want to use, okay? So this one here just gives us, again, the P, the amount we get, right, is the principal. How much did we start with, right? We started with $3,000. The I, how much interest did we earn, right? We earned $405. So if you add the 2 together, you get the $3,405, right? So you can just use this formula there, okay? So the big 2 formulas, I'm just gonna write them out one more time here. I know I've already written them 30 times, but let's just summarize one final time. I'll put a box over here. Here's the formulas you need. If you only want interest, okay? If you only want interest, it's P, principal, times the rate, times time. So sometimes you don't care about how much, you just want to know the interest, that's it, real quick. If you want to know the total amount that you get at the end, plus the interest, right, you can find the interest separately and add it, which is this guy right here, which is totally fine. Or you can just go 1 plus R times T, the rate, times time, plus 1 times it by the principal, okay? Or again, you can just find it separately and add it like I did here. That's this guy right here. This is basically saying find your interest first and then add it. So there's a few different ways, few different formulas to go about going about. They're all really the same thing, right? All right, so let's just do a few quick examples here now that we got all the main stuff out of the way. All right, so let's look at example 2 here. John borrows $25,000 at 6.7% per annum. Remember this little guy here, that slash A means per year, right? So don't forget that, slash A. I'm just gonna write that out to be clear again. That means per year, per annum. Annum, I believe, is Latin again. A lot of this stuff it's pretty old, right? And they still use some of the old terminology. So per annum, simple interest. And that's the other key, simple interest. Keep an eye out. Today, everything's simple interest. The next lesson introduces what's called compound interest, so we gotta be careful which one we're using. All right, he plans to pay back the loan in 8 years. So remember, it doesn't matter if you're borrowing or investing money. The amount of interest that's earned or paid is the same. So we use the same formulas. All right, so let's identify all the different stuff, right? We have P for principal, our starting amount. We have R for the rate. We have T for the time. We can do I is the interest we earn. We can do A is the amount at the end. There's all kinds of different stuff we can find here, okay? Now, I didn't actually attach a question on this because I would just want to walk through all the different things you can find, okay? So John borrows $25,000. So that's the principal. The principal is the $25,000. All right. The interest rate is 6.7% per year. So we're going to make that into a decimal by taking 6.7% divided by 100. It's going to be 0.067. The time is 8 years. All right, so there's our main things. Now, what could we find in this question? There's a few things. If we only want the interest, if I only say, all right, how much interest is he going to owe the bank? Then I can just use this formula, right? P times R times T. So what's the principal? 25,000 times the rate times 0.067 times the time, 8 years. Pretty simple, right? Instead of making a table and adding it up, we can just use the formula really quickly. All right, so we multiply all that. It's staggering what he's going to owe. This is the interest. He is going to owe back $13,400 in interest on top of the loan that he owes, right? So what if you just wanted to know how much it is per year? So that's the total interest. So I'm going to make some notes here, right? This is again is the total interest. If you just want to know how much interest per year, all right, there we go. So how much is that's the total. What if we want to know just the yearly interest, right? How much is he paying each year? Because sometimes the question says, how much does he pay each year in interest? So the yearly interest, well, all we got to do is just basically do what we just did there, except we're just going to go principal times the rate, right? We're just not going to multiply it by the number of years. So in other words, what's 25,000 times 0.067 times 1 year? You can think about it that way. Like if you want to put the t in, right? Well, what is it times 1 year? So that's why I'm saying you don't really need the t there. So if I multiply that, what are we going to get here? We got $1,675. So that's how much he owes in interest each year that he borrows this money, right? Times that by 8 years, he owes a lot of money. Now, how do we get the final amount? Pretty easy, right? So let's get the amount. So again, the amount is the total, right? The total that he owes back. Or if he was investing, the total that he gets from the bank. Okay? So to do that, we already have the interest calculated, so we can do it this way. We have two formulas. We can do it this, P plus I, right? In other words, what's your principal? Okay, I borrowed $25,000 from the bank, and I owe you an interest, $13,400. So add those together, and what do we end up with? $38,400. So that's how much you owe the bank. And this is why it's really important, because you realize, oh man, I owe them like almost half, right? This is almost half the original amount I borrowed, right? At 6.7% interest. It's a lot of money. So when you take money out on a credit card or stuff, imagine if the interest rate was 20%. That's how much it is on credit cards to start, right? Like, this is how they get you. This is how they really financially ruin people, and everyone thinks they're not gonna fall into that trap when they're young. Like, everybody's like, no, I won't fall into that. And then it's amazing how much consumer debt and how much money the whole country owes. It's crazy. So having at least a little bit of an idea of this makes you a little more wary and more intelligent about it. And it helped me a lot when I was in university to not put money on my credit card. I started really doing the thinking about this and saying it's not worth it right now to owe way more money in the future. All right, so we got that. Now, what if the question just said, just tell me the total amount they owe at the end? Now, we already know it's $38,400, but if you just want to do the total all in one formula, so we already know it, so I'll just total in one formula, because some questions you don't need to find the interest separately, right? All you got to do is use this formula that we said, principal times 1 plus the rate times time. So again, we already have the answer, but just showing you another way of doing it, right? $25,000 times 1 plus 0.067 times 8 years, okay? So you'd multiply these together, add 1 to it, and then times it by 25,000, and you would get the same answer we already have, okay? And then you could also find your interest. What's another way if you did it that way, and then what if you wanted your interest at the end? So another way you could find your interest at the end. So I'm just kind of bouncing around showing you all the different ways you can do it. They're all acceptable, right? So another way you could just find your interest, instead of using that formula above, is you could just take this and subtract it, right? What's my amount, right? Minus my principal. That would give me my interest, right? So 38,400 minus 25,000 would give me my principal, which is 13,400. So they're pretty easy formulas. There you go. And we already knew that was the total interest up there at the top, right? All right. So different ways of arriving at the same answer. Okay. So there you go. All right. So let's check out another example here. Okay. So this one's very similar to the last one with one little catch. Ali borrows $1,200 for 120 days. So let's say you ever see those cash advance places? I'm not trying to be anti-business, but I would strongly suggest you never ever step foot in one of those. Okay, no matter how desperate times are. But I guess sometimes you got to do what you got to do. But they will charge you so much interest to borrow money. It's just not worth it. All right, so the principal. Ali's borrowing $1,200. That's how much the principal is. All right, the rate It's 120 days. Oh, here it is. The interest rate is 36% per annum per year, right? So that's high, like really high. Like right now, interest rates on like homes and mortgages and stuff is like lower than 3%. In some places, just due to the crisis, they're in like the 1% to 2% range. At their worst, they've been 8-9%. So think about 36%, how high that is, right? I know when you first start out, you don't have a real good feel of percents, but again, right now, we're in like the 2% to 4% range, for a mortgage on a house, and car loans are maybe around there 2 to maybe 8%, max. So that's 36 is a really high percent, okay? 20% is like a lot of starting credit cards, and that's really high. And like I said, cash advance places will really gouge you. So part of this is I'm really trying to warn you guys for your future. And I wish we were in class where we could really talk about this a little more. All right, so the rate is 36%, 0.36. Now, the time is in years, right? It's per annum. Remember, we're talking about per year. So you do not set the T to 120. That's the mistake everybody makes, right? It's not 120 years. It's 120 days. It's less than a full year. So write it as a fraction, right? It's 120 days out of 365, right? He's not borrowing the money for a full year, so express time as a fraction out of the 365 days in a year. All right, so we can make that into a decimal if we want, or just leave it as a fraction and calculate the decimal later. All right, so if we just want to know the amount he owes at the end, right, we can just use that formula, principal times 1 plus the rate times t. Or if we just want to know how much interest he's going to pay, because we know he has to give them back the $1,200, so if we just want the interest, it's principal times rate times time. Okay? Or, again, you can just break this down. Remember how this formula, you can distribute it and write it like this, right? So really, all you're doing with this formula here is you're calculating the interest, right? And then you're adding the principal to it, okay? So whatever way you like to go, it really doesn't matter. You can use any of the above that I've been showing you. So I'll just look at these two here. $1,200 times 1 plus 0.36 times 120 divided by 365. So when I punch my calculator, first thing I'm going to do is go 120 divided by 365. And that's going to give me a pretty ugly decimal. And then I'm going to times it by 0.36. I'm going to add 1 to that. And then I'm going to times it by the $1,200. And the total amount of money he owes, I'm going to have to round to 2 decimal places, is approximately $1,342.03. Now, that's not too bad, because he only borrowed it for like 120 days, right? So the interest he owes, it looks like it's about $142 is what he owes them back, right? Now, again, if you only just want to know the interest, just go what's 1,200 times 0.36 times the 120 divided by 365. I would just start by dividing those, then times it by 0.36, then times it by 1,200. And it's just going to end up being $142.03 approximately, right? Because I can tell I just looked over here and said, well, how much more is that than 1,200 that he borrowed, right? So I didn't even have to go to my calculator for that. But there you go, right? So again, when you get to the end, if you do this formula first and you just want to know the interest, again, if the amount equals principal minus interest, if we rearrange this formula and move the interest to the other side and the amount over here, then interest equals, sorry, that should be plus interest, my bad. I'm goofing this up here. I'm going so fast. There we go. Why don't we just move the, man, what a slop show, eh? There we go. P plus I. There we go. So if I just subtract principal from this side, my bad. There we go. There. So interest equals the amount minus the principal, right? So if you just take this, 1342 minus 1,200, you will get the interest without having to use the formula. Okay, so there's a variety of ways of getting there. Okay, one more final example here. All right, so this last one, Mira is going to invest $5,000. So the principal is the starting amount, $5,000. She's going to invest in the bank. 8.5 is the simple interest rate. So I'm going to use 8.5%, right? But divide it by 100, right? So if we divide that by 100, we get 0.085. Problem is we don't know how much time. That's the question, right? She wants the money to increase to $8,000. How long will she need to invest her money? So that's the unknown, right? But we do know that she wants the amount at the end. So A is the amount, the ending amount, to be $8,000. All right, so let's just substitute everything we know into one of our formulas. So I'm just going to use this formula here again. Amount equals principal times 1 plus the rate times time. There we go. Or you can distribute this if you'd prefer. It really doesn't matter. Principal plus PRT, whatever you want. They're both the same thing, right? All right, so why don't we substitute in and see what we got. The amount to end with is $8,000. The principal is $5,000 plus 5,000 times 0.085 times t. Now we just got to solve for t. So what are we going to do? I'm going to go, what's 8,000 minus 5,000, right? I'm going to go, what's 5,000 times 0. Which gives me, oops, here we go. Hang on. When I multiply that, I get $425 times t. All right, so 8,000 minus 5,000 is $3,000. And then we're going to divide that, obviously, by the 425. All right, so let's see what we got. 3,000 in my calculator divided by 425, and I've got 7.0588. So we'll just say it's about 7.05 or 7.06. It's just a little over, right? Approximately a little over 7 years. So just to keep it simple, if it was 7.5 or something, I'd say 7.5 years, right? Or 7.1 or 2, I could even, but it's very little over 7 years. So we'll just say, how long will she need to invest? She'll need to invest approximately or just a little over 7 years. How about that? All right. So we'll say, yeah, just a little over 7 years will do for that. All right, so there we go. We just solved for t. All right, so those are pretty simple questions. Make sure you try the work. It's pretty short, and check out the next lesson because it's really important. Thanks.